tomb. This should have been called The Tomb Raider. And it's your boy Icon with some Marvel TV. So, in our last episode, the actual Moon Knight spirit, he was, I guess, relieved of his duty, if you will, from the gods. And they placed him inside like a little tiny statue, and now Mark and Steven are on their own along with Layla. Now, the three of them, they do have the information, like they did get the map to the tomb that they were looking for. So they go down to try to find out to discover the tomb. When they get there, when they get to the place where the tomb is supposed to be, Steven and Mark are kind of getting into an argument because Mark wants to take over, and then Steven's like, no. So while they're having a conversation, Steven's talking to Layla, and then he ends up getting a little close to Layla, and then Mark even said to Steven, he was like, are you trying to talk to my wife? He's like, do you have a thing for my wife? And then, he was just like, oh, he's like, it's none of your business. And then he ends up talking to Layla. The funny thing is, Layla kind of has a thing for Steven too, but I mean, I'm still not 100% convinced that Layla is 100% convinced that the two of them can switch back and forth to two different spirits. I feel like Layla just thinks that Mark has a split personality. He's just acting weird. But the funny thing, oddly enough, she did fall for Steven, and there was a moment where she was saying to Steven, she was just like, oh, you're just so like warm and you're so comforting, you're different from Mark and blah, blah, blah. And then the two of them ended up kissing, and then that's when Steven had told her, he was just like, oh, listen, he was like, I just thought I'd let you know. He was like, that Mark, he is trying to protect you because he's like, oh, the gods want you to be the new Avatar, and he doesn't want it. He wants to protect you from that. So then she kind of like felt bad, and she was just like, no, it's my life, and I can choose whatever I want. And then they walked away and they went to the tomb. So then when they get into the tomb, there's a moment where they get into a room, and then while they're in the room, like this demon thing shows up and starts killing a man. The two of them got separated because Steven had climbed up top, to go look for a different path to the tomb, and Layla stayed on the bottom. Layla was on the bottom with the monster. And while she was on the bottom with the monster, she was trying not to speak. She was trying to stay silent, like Steven was trying to stay silent, but the monster ended up finding both of them. It attacked both of them, and then the two of them, like Steven was just like, oh, let's just split up and meet up later. And then they ran off, and then they did their own thing. The monster ended up going after Layla. And when the monster fought Layla, she fought back, whatever. This is where Layla went full-blown Lara Croft on her because both Layla and the monster had this big old fight. They went over a cliff, and then Layla came back up after the cliff. She took, like a flare and jammed it into the monster's eye. Layla basically kicked some serious ass, so she's like, she's ready to go. They basically turned this girl into Lara Croft. So we got Yu-Gi-Oh! And we got Lara Croft. So then after she killed the monster, Ethan Hawke's character shows up, and then he was just sitting there like he watched the whole fight unfold, and then he was just like, oh, do you want to know the truth about, about Mark and about your daddy? And then, she was just like, oh, you're itching to tell me, so you might as well just tell me the information. And then he basically told her that when her dad died, he said that your dad was killed by mercenaries. And not only was your dad killed by mercenaries, he didn't actually say it, she said it, and then he didn't deny it. He basically kind of like manipulated her into believing that Mark was one of the mercenaries that killed her father. And he even said, he was like, oh, Mark knew this information the whole time, and he chose not to tell you. He kept it within. He was like, oh, but you know the truth. And then he was just like, oh, join me, because they're trying to get this girl to be an avatar. He was like, join me. And then she was just like, no, you're lying. And then he was like, it's true. And then she got mad and she walked away. And for some weird reason, he didn't follow her. She was literally standing right there. He could have just followed her, but then he just sat there. His mercenary villain showed up, and then he was just like, oh, let's go after the girl. But I'm like, she was literally just like right there. So she finds Steven. Steven finds the tomb that they were looking for. And in order for him to find the clue, he ended up having to go into because they said that they found the tomb of Alexander the Great, I believe it was. And in order to find the clue that they were looking for, Steven had to jam his hand into the mouth of a dead body, which was gross. And then he pulled out another, doll, one of those little dolls, and he was like, hey, we found it. And then Layla showed up, and then he was just like, oh, look, we found what we've been searching for. He's like, we have the power that we finally need to take down the enemy. And then now she's all emotional because of the daddy thing. And she's like, oh, can Mark hear me? And he was like, oh, I guess he can. But he was like, why? She was like, do you know about my father? She was like, did you kill my daddy? And then that's when Mark took over. He was just like, yo, tag in, tag out. Mark tagged in. And then he was like, I didn't kill your dad. He said that I had nothing to do with that. He said the mercenaries killed your dad. But she was like, but you were that. And he was just like, yes. He was like, I was there because I was looking for the tombs and stuff. I was looking for the artifacts. So she said that because you were looking for the artifacts, you brought these vicious men into my daddy's life, and you're the reason why he got killed. And then he was just like, yeah. But at the same time, he was like, look, Ethan Hawke's on his way upstairs with like 1,500 people. We need to go. And then she was just like, "Oh, tell me the truth about my father." And he's just like, "Woman, hey, we need to go." So then Ethan Hawke and his goons show up, and then he told Layla, he was like, "Hide around the corner." He's like, "I'll take care of them." And then Ethan Hawke and like Mark, they got into a conversation. Ethan Hawke was basically just like, he was like, "You know what, screw this." He was like, "If you don't want to help me," he was like, I'll take the decision out of your hands." And he took a gun out and he shot Mark twice in the chest, and then Mark basically died. Now, when Mark died, or when he got shot, he fell over and crashed into the water because there was like a little like pool thing on the floor. When he crashed into the water, this sparked I don't know, like, this is very confusing. There was a dream sequence where, all right, there was a scene where Mark had woken up in a nut house. They were giving him pills to sedate him. There were people in white coats and white outfits. Layla was there. She was crazy too. And Ethan Hawke's character was basically the psychiatric doctor who was talking to Mark about his problems. And every single thing about, the psychiatric ward reminded him of like the pyramids and the tombs. Ethan Hawke kept talking to him to try to get him to reveal some information and talk about his life and talk about his past, but Mark didn't want to say anything. And then after a while, Mark was just like, no, he was just, because, like the drugs was like hitting him, but he was just like, "Wait a minute, you're the one that shot me and like you tried to kill me." And he was like, "No, Mark," he's like, "You're having a psychotic breakdown." He was like, "Just talk to me." And at this point, I'm kind of like, did Ethan Hawke's character create this whole like nut house dream sequence in an effort to trick Mark into telling him the information? Or did going into the water put them in this place? Are they trapped inside Mark's own mind? Is he like in a coma or something? And then even the artifact, because when he pulled the artifact out of Alexander the Great's tomb, when he pulled the artifact out of his mouth, and then Layla showed up and they got into the argument, and then he told Layla to hide around the corner. Did he give Layla the artifact, or does he still have the artifact? Does the artifact have magic powers that force that whole dream sequence? I was very confused about like where this whole thing came from. And then, like Mark basically like kind of like snapped out of the drugs. He beat up the orderlies and then he ran. And once again, when he ran away, Ethan Hawke's character did not chase him. He just watched him leave. And I'm just like, dude, like you do absolutely nothing. And then while Mark was running through the psychiatric ward, he saw a tomb. And then when he opened the tomb and lifted the cover, Steven was in the tomb. So now we got Steven and Mark together at the same time. They're both in the psychiatric ward and they're both running from the orderlies. And I'm like, why are you running from the orderlies when you just beat them up by yourself like 2 seconds ago? So now they're running from the orderlies, and then another orderly like bust through the door, and then it was like some weird like animal looking chick. And I think that's the actual form of the god of love. That might actually be her real form, but they saw like this weird monster thingy, and then they screamed, and then she screamed, and then that's how the episode ended. So this was weird. This was very weird. No MoonKnight in this episode. This was basically the adventures of Layla. This whole thing was basically about Layla, except when they did the whole thing with them being in the psychiatric ward. Again, I'm confused about who created the psychiatric ward. Like how did this whole psychiatric thing even come about? I'm a little confused about that, but hopefully we get those answers in the next episode. The one thing I will say about these Marvel these Marvel Disney Plus series, they're way too short. And a lot of times I feel like the storyline is rushed because they only have 6 episodes and they don't give it enough time to actually tell a proper story, because there are a lot of things that happen, like the whole thing about the reveal of like him being around when her dad died. I'm like, why are we learning this in episode 4? The whole thing about the original Moon Knight spirit being trapped by the gods, I'm like, this happened in like episode 3. We have 2 episodes left and I'm more confused than ever about what the hell's going on. So hopefully they wrap all this up in a nice little bow, but it would be nice to get maybe 8 to 10 episodes going forward so they can actually tell the story in detail. Like I said, it just seems like they're just trying to rush to get to the ending, and I'm missing a lot of like, character development along the way. But share your thoughts and your questions down below, and thank you for tuning in. What did you think of this particular episode of Moon Knight? I mean, I don't have a problem with just having Mark and Steven and Layla. I mean, like, the 3 of them are cool, but the purpose is Moon Knight, so we should actually see Moon Knight if the show's called Moon Knight. But even then, it's like, if you're going to give us an episode like this, having Layla's backstory and the reveal of her dad was actually cool, but that was really the only thing about the episode that told you anything. Everything else in the episode was a complete mystery, and it was very confusing. But like I said, the show's not bad. It's just like, I'm just waiting for the payoff and waiting for actual explanations of certain things to happen. But again, share your thoughts down below. What do you think about this particular episode? Are you excited for the last two? And do you think the show will get a season 2, if it ends? And do you agree with me that these shows should get more than 6 episodes to tell that story? Like I said, share your questions, comments, and concerns, and we will continue to talk about it. Hit me up on Twitter and Instagram as always. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Hit the notification bell so you can get notified when my other videos pop up, because we got Young Justice on my channel, and Young Justice is going strong, guys. Like, thank you to everybody that watched and commented on my Young Justice videos and also liked the videos as well. I appreciate you till no end. Let's keep it going with everything else, all DC related, because in another week or so we're getting Superman and Lois back, we're getting the Flash back, and we're getting back Naomi, and we got 2 more episodes of Moon Knight. So thanks for tuning in, guys. So till next time for some Moon Knight action, hopefully we will get Moon Knight. Take care of the tubes, and until then, I'm out this bitch.